The Movie Health Podcast is proudly supported by Telemoods by eClapper Project Inc. Telemoods recommends which movies and TV series to watch by matching the user's mood and real-time offer of all streaming platforms. Download Telemoods today. Welcome to the Movie Health Podcast, where we talk about movies and mental health. This is AJ.
This is Catherine.
And in this episode, we talk with Tom Vincent, film curator and program manager at Cinefest Oz Film Festival in the Margaruba. Tom, interestingly and coincidentally, has also started training to be a counsellor. So certainly exploring the same interests around movies and mental health. Welcome, Tom.
Thanks a lot, AJ.
So today we're talking about Perfect Days, released in 2023. Perfect Days is directed by Wim Wenders. When I actually thought Wim Wenders in Paris, Texas, back in 1984, which is nearly 40 years ago. And I know he has done quite a bit in between. Yeah, so Perfect Days takes us to Tokyo, where we meet Hira Yama, a middle-aged man that cleans public toilets and lives a life of simplicity and daily tranquility, as it says in IMDb. And some encounters also lead him to reflect on himself. So, Tom, Catherine and I saw this on Tuesday night. It has limited release, unfortunately, even though Perfect Days was at the Cannes Film Festival last year. Kojo Yakushu,
Yakusho.
He actually won Best Actor
Yes.
for his role as Hirayama. So why did you pick this movie? Tell us more about, I suppose, your reaction to it. Happy to explore.
Yeah, thanks, AJ. So thanks for the full welcome. Happy to be here. And as you say, I've been working as a film curator, which essentially means that I choose movies for cinemas and film festivals. So I've been doing that for about 20 years in various contexts in the UK and latterly in Australia. And Perfect Days is a film that I also saw this week for the third time. I went to Luna Leederville Cinema here in Perth on Wednesday afternoon rather. And that was my third time watching the film. The first time was almost a year ago at the Cannes Film Festival, so quite close to the film's world premiere. And I was looking at the film as part of my selection process at that time for the festival, which means spending a lot of time at Cannes Film Festival, watching a lot of films, and for those films that really, really move me, and for which I think I could confidently say that there would be an audience for, I would be talking to those films' potential distributors and trying to book them for the festival that I was working for. And I saw Perfect Days fairly early on, quite early on in that festival. It was probably the second day, maybe the third day. I'm pretty sure it was the first film I saw that day. I knew it was directed by Wim Wenders. I knew it was set in Tokyo. I knew that it starred Yakusho Koji, and I am familiar with all of those things. So I've several of Wim Wenders' films. I actually lived in Tokyo 20 years ago and have visited periodically, and my wife is Japanese. So I have a long-standing connection to that place and that culture. And finally, I know Yakusho Koji's work, the actor. I've seen him in films as well, and always liked him. So all of these things kind of set me up quite nicely to see that film. However, there was a bit of concern because several of the more recent Wim Wenders films have not been very good. In more recent years, he's been much better known as a documentary filmmaker. Those have been the more successful. with Vincenzo's films and his fiction films. Yeah, they've been quite patchy. So, it sounds good on paper. How is it? Is it really? Let's just treat it in a bit of curiosity or caution. And I sat back, watched the film, and it just really resonated very nicely with me. I found it immediately very beautiful, very relaxing. I was completely swept along with the filmmaking. I found every element of the film just fitted together in a loving way, and I was left with this real feeling of that left me in a really really great place. And it's not just because I want to show that film in Perth, and I did. I knew immediately I wanted to program that film, but it was also, this film is doing something quite quite special and quite interesting in its effect on me, and I sort of recognized that it was doing something, I guess, similar to other films that I've seen that have affected me in similar ways, and I might call that a kind of everyday transcendence, to
Mm,
sum it up. So,
yeah,
yeah,
and the
that's
film itself. Oh, sorry.
no, that's it. So that was my first response, and then I saw it again when we eventually showed it at Perth Festival at it was actually an outdoor cinema called Somerville, which is surrounded by palm trees. So there's something quite special about that second experience of seeing it, because those that have seen the film know that trees are quite important in the movie. So seeing the film outdoors, literally surrounded by trees, had a kind of extra dimension. And then
Mm.
this week on Wednesday was my third go at it, and it was very much in preparation for this and to refresh my memory. And I was in that time I was actually making a lot of notes, but also once again really loving the film, and cried again a couple of times.
Yeah, did you say everyday transcendence?
Well,
Was the initial feeling?
that's just the phrase that I've alighted on to trying to summarize what I think the film's doing. One of the
Yeah.
things the film's doing, I think the film's interesting for a few different reasons, but
Mm.
everyday transcendence is really key.
Yeah, and you mentioned with Wim Wenders' more recent movies or shorts have been documentary style, and
Hmm.
as you said, his fiction movies haven't landed
Mm.
as well as his earlier work. But the film itself, it has a very documentarian style to it.
Hmm.
So as you said, so the movie's set in Tokyo, follows the Hirayama.
Yeah.
Hirayama. I'm just going to keep saying, and I'm going to get better at it. So
Okay.
it follows him, and I'd say the first third of the movie is understanding his daily routine. So he gets up every morning. He puts his bed away. He you know trims his moustache.
Yeah. That's,
He leaves his house. He gets a coffee. Gets in his car, and he goes to he gets dressed. Sorry, in a toilet cleaning outfit. Puts his
mhm.
towel on around his neck. Gets in his car, plays some classic 60s/70s music. It makes you feel as though you're in a Wes Anderson movie. And
Mm.
that immediately gives you a sense that we'll probably need to dig into a bit deeper. But then once follows through the majestic setting of Tokyo early in the morning, he arrives at a toilet. And if any, I've been to Tokyo. If you've been there before, the particularly toilets, if not most of the city, is immaculately looked after.
Yes.
High degree of hygiene and respect for those, uh, you know, for toilets. Very different to Australia. And I love the selection of all the different types of toilets, which there's maybe sort of some sort of statement around toilets and the design of toilets themselves.
Mm.
But yeah, the first third is his daily routine, and then once we sort of understand his daily routine, it's then somewhat disrupted. I'd say maybe not disrupted, but there is
Yeah.
his niece is introduced
Mhm.
into the story, and so then he needs to adjust his daily routine, which is very meticulous and seems to be very calming and soothing, is then disrupted by his niece. We're introduced to his sister briefly. And then, say the third act, we actually learn a bit more about him as a character. We learn that there is a past to him. And I would say, maybe halfway through, I was a little worried about where it was going, because the setup of that, however, how it's just meticulously shot, and just the scenery and the let's just call it the beautiful routine that he goes through on a daily basis. It feels as though, and I was trying to articulate with Catherine after we saw it, it felt as though there was something masking that routine, or he was doing that routine as a form of escape, or as a form of control on something in the past. Before I let you have the mic back, or love to hear Catherine's thoughts on this. Is it's the movie's called Perfect Days, and a song, one of the 60s and 70s songs that they chose, all American songs, I think, except for one folk Japanese song, is Lou Reed's Perfect Day, the song Perfect Day. And after I watched the movie, I listened to the song again, and the last, I think, chorus is continuously reap what you sow. You've got to reap what, I'm not going to sing it, but you've got to reap what you sow. You've got to reap what you sow. And so that's very much about whatever happened in the past, you're going to have to deal with now.
Right.
So that was kind of my reaction to it, but I agree. It's such a beautiful film, and really does affect you, and really makes you reflect and think about him as a character. And then there's a couple of other moments in the movies, maybe I won't talk about right now, but also does give off a few indications that there's a little bit more under the surface, let's say.
Yes, and I think a lot of what you sensed about him, I wonder whether that comes from simply spending so much time observing him, and that in itself is, leads you to think, well, movies don't usually do this. Movies don't usually follow one character doing a pretty similar thing repeatedly. And as I say, I was making notes, and the number of days is 13. So we see 13 days, and it seems to go Monday to Sunday, and then back to Saturday again. So I think we actually see every one of 13 days in a row. And so, and we also see him right when he's waking up and right when he's falling asleep. And that's a very unusual way of structuring a movie. And I think you are perhaps subconsciously, quite curious then, well, why is the movie doing this? Naturally, what are the filmmakers up to here? And yeah, that's a really interesting observation about the Lou Reed song. And I always think of that line in that song, I thought I was someone else, someone good. And I always found that such a devastating little lyric, because it just kind of really causes you to question the whole song that you've heard until that point, which is about, a perfect day, apparently. But there's something else going on. And yes, we do learn, we learn just enough about that, I think, to have a sense of the richness of him and his character. As you say, and his niece appears not until about 2/3 of the way through the movie, and she's run away from home, we learn, and he hasn't seen her for quite a few years. I think it's trying to work it out. I think it's about at least 5, 6 years, and possibly quite a bit more. And he says, he doesn't really recognize her at first. He has to check. Well, that's you. That's Aya. Her name's Aya. No, her name's Nico. Sorry. Which may itself be a reference to the Velvet Underground, just occurs to me. But and
another one,
yeah, and then towards about 3/4 of the way through the movie, Kiriyama's sister is there, and she's clearly from an very markedly different socioeconomic category, or at least she presents herself that way. And then they have a conversation that involves their dad, and you're like, oh, okay, now I can probably intuit what might have happened in Hirayama and his sister's past.
Mm.
And it's interesting as well. You mentioned documentary style because the film did originate as a documentary. Vin Vendors was I don't know whether he was commissioned, but he was planning to make a documentary only about toilets.
Mm.
And he was visiting Japan shortly after the pandemic. The toilets were built as part of um, the public works legacy of the Tokyo Olympics. And they commissioned these really extremely good architects to make, and I guess very comforting toilets in the heart of Tokyo. And Finn Vendors said he was struck just how much Japan, after the pandemic, managed to return to the sense of people doing things for the common good. Unlike where he's from in Germany, he was saying there's this contrast in Germany after the pandemic. Things were left generally worse than before, in the sense that people were once again out for themselves, maybe a little bit more. But he observed that in Japan, the character of Tokyo and of Japan was that people looked after each other better, and a sort of manifestation of this was that there were these a lot of care had gone into making these toilets, and so his original project was to make a documentary solely about toilets. And I find it interesting that at certain points in Perfect Days, we're just enjoying the toilets in a very kind of matter of fact. These are really good toilets, and celebrating those toilets and celebrating kind of public life in Japan, and how much care there often be in the details of things.
Wim Wenders would be disappointed to hear me say this, but in that first third, Kiriyama doesn't really say anything, so there's no dialogue. It's just following him on his routine and cleaning the toilets. And I don't know if you've seen it, but it actually reminded me of a Nicolas Cage movie called Willy's Wonderland.
Where I haven't seen that.
Yeah, you don't rush to see it, but basically, he's trapped in like this old American restaurant that has the animatronic animals in it, and he is stuck in there. And I think he's even he needs to clean it. I think I forgot the premise, but basically, he spends the whole movie not talking and cleaning cleaning these toilets,
Okay,
and then these animatronic monsters come and attack him. So
sounds good.
yeah, no, it's good. It's good fun. It's on these sort of top 10 worst movies, but it did reminded me, and that was one of my notes. So yeah, Catherine, did you have anything you wanted to share?
Yeah, so I know that there's a lot of commentary that the film is about living in the moment and finding beauty in the little things. And I was reading somewhere that Hirayama looks at the world with his eyes but sees with his heart. I think there was something really touching about the simple joy on his face when he would watch nature and just observe people. I'm wondering, Tom, since he was a solitary man, even a hermit, some would say, like how do you think his interactions with others impacted him? I know that obviously it kind of just his routine, like certain interactions he
Yeah.
had, and I'm just curious what you thought about that.
Yeah, it's a great question because there are several other characters in the movie. So we mentioned his niece and his sister. There's also a male co-worker called Takashi, who's quite an important character. There's Takashi's kind of crush, I guess, not really girlfriend, but there's this woman that he has a major. It's quite funny actually because he really wants to. He's very unlike Hirayama in some ways. He's much younger. He's much more distractible. He's a pretty funny character in contrast to Hirayama, and he talks a lot. And there's this kind of quite funny subplot with Takashi, I think, really wants to go off with Aya and have sex with her. And he's trying to arrange this really quickly and he's asking Hirayama to kind of help him out and like give him a ride because his scooter won't start, and he really wants to like go off and have sex with Aya. And Aya's pretty at this point pretty ambivalent about that. So Hirayama is quite tolerant of Takashi. He doesn't really respond to Takashi's conversation much, and Takashi kind of says a few times, "I don't really know what you're thinking," if you don't say anything. And he just Takashi just um, kind of monologues this stuff like, I don't know what's going on with you. I mean, they get on fine, and Takashi seems to respect Hirayama. And then they go off to a record store and Takashi tries to convince Hirayama to sell some of his cassettes. Hirayama has all these cassettes of he plays his 60s and 70s classic pop and rock tunes mostly in his van from cassette, and then this becomes a kind of point of interest for Aya, Takashi's girlfriend, and she's like really curious about his cassettes. And then Takashi goes, "Oh, we can make some money for this." And there's quite a funny scene in a record shop where Hirayama is quoted at quite a healthy price for his cassettes. And then Takashi's like, "Well, if we can sell these, I can get some money. I can go take Aya out on a date or whatever Takashi thinks he needs to do." And Hirayama's like, "No, I'm not selling those. That's it." Turns it down. There's quite a revealing scene a bit later where Aya turns out that Aya actually, so that's Takashi's girlfriend. She steals the cassette of the Patti Smith album Horses, and she kind of puts the tape on. She's like, she's really into it. She's really moved by one of the songs on Horses, which is called Redondo Beach. And she takes the tape. You see her take the tape away, and then a little bit later she comes back and she's like, "Hey, I'm returning this. Thanks." And Hirayama's like, "Oh, okay." And she goes, "Oh, can we listen to it one more time?" And they sit in the van together, just Hirayama and Aya, listening to Redondo Beach, and she's clearly been quite moved by the song. She's learned the lyrics. She's mouthing the lyrics, and then and that's pretty much it. She says, "Did Takashi tell you about me?" Which I was talking to someone about it, and we think that Aya has actually realized, probably because of something in the subtext of that song, that she definitely does not want to be with Takashi. And in fact, we learned that they have, she has ended it with him. Whatever might have emerged from that relationship, it's not going to happen. Definitely not. And so that relationship is a kind of it's a connection over art, and there's a lot of sharing of kind of art and creativity between Hirayama and other characters. So there's that connectivity over the Patti Smith song with Aya. He plays noughts and crosses or tic-tac-toe with an anonymous toilet user. He finds a note stuck behind a mirror in one of the toilets, where it's a noughts and crosses grid which has been begun, and he decides to contribute to it. And over several scenes in the rest of the movie, this game of noughts and crosses plays out with somebody who is a stranger. He doesn't know who it is. It's an anonymous game. We can intuit it might be one of the characters that he sees in the park, I think. There's a woman who eats a sandwich near him who seems to pop up whenever he's playing noughts and crosses. And there's an interesting encounter in a bookshop where the bookseller we see him buy a couple of books on his days off, and every time he goes to the counter with a book, the bookseller makes a really insightful, succinct comment about the author. So there's one. The second time he buys a book, it's a book by Aya Koda, who's a feminist Japanese writer. And the bookseller just goes, "Aya Koda, she uses the same words that we do, but she manages to say something completely new," or something like that. It's just this kind of this shared insight into art. And it's interesting. Like most of the time that happens, it's with women. which I thought was interesting. He also connects with his niece Nico over photography. It turns out he's given her a camera some years ago, and they both take pictures of the trees with that. So I think he connects with other people a lot. Ostensibly, yes, he's a solitary character, but he's actually got a very rich set of relationships. But they're quite gentle, and they're quite minimal, respectful, and always with a shared kind of perspective on the world, which is quite, again, transcendent, beautiful. The final sequence we probably may not want to spoil in case people want to go out and see this movie, but something a little different happens in the last little bit of the film, maybe the last 10-15 minutes, where there's, I think, the taking on of a much bigger responsibility in terms of relationships. I don't know if we want to talk about that or not. What do you think?
One, I suppose, to add to that observation about Hirayama's relationships, something that I wrote down and I picked up with a lot of the characters is this sense of, and the movie itself, not to overanalyze it, but this concept of duality. So all the characters have, there's the sort of the surface level. Who's the guy that he works with?
His name's
Hirayama.
Takashi.
Takashi, yeah. So he seems like he's not taking his job seriously. He's trying to chase this girl, but then he has this really lovely relationship with with a boy with
that's right,
a mental disability.
Yes,
and so that's that relationship. That there's the duality there that we and that's consistent across quite a few of the other characters. I think there's quite a pivotal moment towards the end of the movie, which is better not spoiled, but Hirayama has sort of is confronted with something that affects him deeply, and we learn more about him, and that's something that Catherine and I sort of immediately talked about after we saw the movie, which says that there is something in the past that has affected him, and that has driven him to the life he has now. But what that actually, and the point you made about the toilets as well is quite interesting, and how Tokyo recovered after COVID. A really beautiful scene in the movie is Hirayama meets with another man by the river. It doesn't sound as sus as that, but basically they have a conversation, and then their conversation turns into a little bit more playful and friendly, and they have this conversation about if two shadows cross over, does the shadow become darker? And it's like, whoa, geez, that's deep stuff. But but there's that level of support, and then there's that, I don't know, just the duality across all the characters. I thought was really effective, and even though it's not blatantly saying this character's intentions is this, and this is the role that this character plays, there is just more to people than meets the eye. And just acknowledge that, and certainly toward the ending of the film really brings that home as well. That really says a lot about Hirayama, and tells us that don't judge a book by its cover. There's more under the surface, and there's that concept of duality. So that was sort of one of my sort of primary notes from watching and reflecting on it.
That's all true, I think, and similarly, I suppose just in the film's sort of basic premise and the way it's presented to the audience is sort of, well, he's a toilet cleaner. Most of us don't really consider what a toilet cleaner might be thinking and feeling and observing, and just in this kind of placing you there, as you said, you're seeing the same everyday situations, everyday characters with a sympathetic or empathetic kind of eye. The film is very much saying, we are all complex. We all contain different things that can be teased out in different ways. So I completely completely agree. And I think that's a really important point about Takashi's encounters with that little boy, this boy called Dere-chan, who only pops up twice in the movie very briefly. And his whole thing is that he loves Takashi, and in particular, he loves his ears. So he just runs up to Takashi when he sees him, and fondles his ears. And Takashi's like, yeah, this is my friend. He loves to touch my ears. So we see that Takashi, as in some ways, is actually a bit like Hirayama, because he likes to play and enjoy the moment as well, and is quite receptive to Dera-chan's enjoyment of his own ears.
Catherine, was there anything? There is a question I want to ask Tom around other movies. So, is there anything you wanted to dig into?
Yeah, well, I wanted to ask you, Tom, since you've started training as a counselor and you're interested in providing film therapy eventually, since you've seen this film 3 times and you've obviously had a very profound impact on you, if you were to use this film and all particular scenes in it with a client, how would you do so?
Well, that's a great question, Catherine. Yeah, I haven't thought about that. As you say, I'm just beginning my training as a counselor. And I have been thinking about the use of movies specifically in therapy in a kind of general sense. And I wonder how a movie like Perfect Days might be, suggested to or prescribed to a client. I know that a lot of situations where clients present to therapists, typically work stresses can be a part of that. And one thing that in terms of my working through of my work stresses, one thing I took from Perfect Days was I might call it a kind of recalibration. That just the sense that work and paid work need not necessarily be something that completely defines you, and that one can be a very diligent and competent worker and find satisfaction from that in all kinds of apparent menial jobs. And I think I think that can be true, and that it's very much a question of perspective. And the often thing the film does is offer a fresh perspective on work. And another thing that's happening in that movie is that the incorporation of play and joy and even art, I would say, within menial work is very much there. And so it's just returning to that idea of everyday transcendence. I'm not sure how more specifically, you might lead a client to watch any particular movie, but I guess Catherine, you might know more about that than I do.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking that if a client presents with maybe some grief around family, maybe there's some estrangement there, there's something that they're running away from and not confronting. I think this film would be very powerful for that. So I'd probably use it. I'd have to watch it again, but I think that's something I would use it for.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, so that's interesting. So when you saw the film, were you particularly taken by the notion of a potential grief in Hirayama's character?
Yeah. I think so, yeah. And I mean, the last scene, well, I know we still don't want to ruin it, but I feel like I was asking questions like, is he actually fulfilled? Is he living a life of resignation? Like, what is happening here? Yeah, because that scene really stuck with me as well, and I've kept thinking about it too.
I think we can say that the film ends with, for me, one of the great close-up shots I've seen in movies for a very long time. We get a song. It's "Feeling Good" by Nina Simone. One last tune in Hirayama's van, and we see his face in close-up as he's driving, and there's it's such an extremely great performance by Yaksha Koji. I think suggests a lot of deep and complex emotions just in one shot as all of this stuff flickers across his face. It's very, very powerful and very, very open to interpretation.
And that's probably by design,
Oh
I would
yeah,
imagine, Tom. So,
yeah.
I mean, obviously, filmmaking, there is many intentions in filmmaking, and one of those intentions could be for the film to be, what's the word? Made to be interpreted, and that's the power of stories, and in the medium of storytelling. It will be consumed by many people with many different backgrounds,
Hmm.
many different views of the world. And I personally watched it, and at the end of it, I felt I was quite reflective, but I felt quite sad. I thought it was quite a sad movie. Just such a beautiful film at the same time. And as you said, just brilliant, brilliant direction, brilliant production, like the meticulous recreation, and really that essence of Tokyo. And if you haven't been before, it really, that sort of both the grit and the clean,
Yes.
and the landscape and the complication, but also the beautiful design of such a fascinating city.
Mm.
So yeah, we love the movie. Thank you so much for recommending seeing it. Catherine and I really made sure that we went to the cinema to see it as well. So I highly recommend it. So before we let you go, is there any other films that you've seen recently? And I think you said it really elegantly before that daily transcendence that's really inspired or motivated you. And happy for any film recommendations.
Well, yeah. I mean, the really the re- the thing I want to say most in answer to that question is the Japanese director Yasujiro Ozu, and his best known film is called Tokyo Story, and that's a great place to start. It's one of the best films ever made, and it's also the the greatest one of the very greatest examples of a filmmaker who always incorporated everyday transcendence in his works. Wim Wenders is a huge fan of this director, and I'm sure would not have made Perfect Days possibly at all, and certainly not in the way he made it if it had not been for Yasujiro Ozu. If anyone's looking for a particular recommendation, it has to be Tokyo Story, which is sort of the one that draws most people in. But all of Ozu's films are wonderful, and he was one of the very greats who ever did it.
And is that
Sorry.
is that Tokyo Story that in 1953?
Yeah, it's from
Really?
it's from 1950. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Amazing. Sorry, Catherine.
That's all right. I know, Tom, you told me that you watched Love Lies Bleeding, and I know,
Oh,
AJ,
yeah.
you recently saw it. I saw it too. So what did you think of that?
I liked Love Lies Bleeding. That's a film with Kristen Stewart and another actress whose name I can't recall. Who are it's all set in and around a kind of weightlifting scene. I think it's in Texas, right? Probably in the late 80s. And it's a kind of crime. It's a southern noir crime thriller with lesbian overtones. Very stylized, quite funny. Takes a lot of twists and turns. Yeah, I found it really enjoyable. I love what Kristen Stewart does. As a screen presence. I think she's for people on her wavelength. She this is one where she really delivers that Kristen that's sort of spiky, slightly just discombobulating. Something happened to the audio.
Yeah.
Yeah, that she really delivers that slightly spiky Christian Stewartness in Love Lies Bleeding. What did you guys think?
I really liked it too. From the very first shot, I was mesmerized. I think that the soundtrack was great, and I haven't seen any of Rose Glass's other films, but I am very intrigued now. Definitely want to see Saint Maud. Yeah, I think he was done so well, and Ed Harris's character. My goodness, I think he's also a very unique presence on screen.
That's true. He is. Yeah. And do you think it can be used in therapeutic? Well, I guess a question for you, Catherine. Can any movie, in theory, be used in a beneficial, affect in therapy?
I think most films can, like even horror as my favorite genre, but I think there is a limit. So maybe a movie like Old Boy.
Okay.
I don't think that would necessarily be
It's
a good film
hard to
to
imagine.
use.
Yeah, hard to imagine that having a.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in general, the starting principle is most things can. Yeah. Let's see.
Most. Yeah. What did you think, AJ?
What are we talking about now?
Love Lies Bleeding.
I Love Live Bleeding. Yeah. So Love Live. Yeah. I know. And I watched that recently. I missed it at the cinemas, and I saw it. I think it was a weekend movie. I saw streaming, and yes, I really enjoyed it too. I really liked Saint Maud. That was actually filmed in Yorkshire. I don't know if that's any connection to you, Tom, but
it is.
that's very much of the. Much like Tokyo, the setting of Saint Maud is really important. So that it's sort of like a small English town where there's in a low socio-economic scenario, young girl going to school, having challenges, life challenges, and then goes on a pretty has a pretty traumatic experience. The director, who's the director of both films?
Rose Glass.
Rose Glass. I mean, she takes some of those sentiments and brings it into Love Lies Bleeding into a more of an American setting. But I just love her creativity. So it's very much grounded on realistic characters. But then, there's elements within Saint Maud which, brings in the supernatural, and then the same applies to Love Lies Bleeding, which is a fairly, it seems straight down the line horror / thriller. But then, you have the sort of there's moments within Love Lies Bleeding where there's the bodybuilding character is sort of slowly increasing in size. You're like, is that real or is that fantasy? So it has that element to it. So yeah, no, I really enjoyed both of them. Yeah, and Kristen Stewart is both. It's great to see that both. Is it Kirsten Stewart? Kristen Stewart, and who's her Twilight partner?
Robert Pattinson.
Robert
Pattinson. Great to see that they've survived the Twilight years, unlike their co-star or the Wolf guy. He didn't really go anywhere, did he? But at least they've got really nice, healthy careers. One's doing indie, one's doing Batman, which I don't know if see as a success, but he's done plenty of other really cool movies. So thank you so much, Tom, for your time, your insights, your experience, and providing your recommendation on Perfect Days. As we mentioned, we loved the film, thought it was fascinating and insightful, and we look forward to working again sometime.
Hey, thanks so much, AJ and Catherine. I've really enjoyed it and appreciate the invitation and look forward to chatting again. Thanks so much.
Thank you. The Movie Health Podcast is proudly supported by Telemoods by eClapper Project Inc. Telemoods recommends which movies and TV series to watch by matching the user's mood and real-time offer of all streaming platforms. Download Telemoods today.